Thank you for the invitation. I think we will turn now to some abstractions, but I will try to give you some images which will be helpful to get the main idea of this paper. My point here is the differences in the experience and expression of national identity in the old, it means Western, and the new Central and Eastern Europe, can be understood in the light given by the comparative analysis of the paternal figure position in these two different types of societies. So we can understand nationalisms or national identities analyzing two types of paternal figure and paternal function as it is described in psychoanalysis. These two types of paternal function can be described as first an image of a father, imaginative father, a person, like was, for example, in France General de Gaulle, or in Poland Piłsudski. And the second paternal function is the anonymous authority, the anonymous law, something which is much less imaginative, much less human in some way, but much more rigid and formal. In psychoanalysis, and especially in the Lacanian branch, we are always passing from the imaginative relation to the paternal figure, such a paternal person, to the symbolic paternal function. It means that we are passing to the law. And my point is that the biggest difference is that between Western and Eastern and Central Europe is that in Western Europe we have to do much more with the symbolic function of the father, or normative function of the father, and in the East with the imaginative function of the father, or with the imaginary figure of the father. I will start with a general description of this problem as it appears in the societies of Eastern Europe. Here, the history conditioned the return of the father, of the imaginative father, as the very important factor of the reinforcement of collective identity, which weakened during the enforcement and the collapse of the communist system. These societies, which were living long time in the shadow of the beloved father of the nation, after it collapsed, turned toward the fantasy of the traditional paternal figure after the Berlin Wall collapsed. I put the stress on the word fantasy, since this type of patriarchate is, at least in the urban part of the societies, ruling the imaginative level of social consciousness rather than the real core of social relations. So I would say it is much more something people imagine than practice in their everyday life. Since the Berlin Wall collapsed, this conjunction, rise of the imaginative paternal figures in the consciousness, opposed to the uncertainty of the real structure of the gender roles, and finally the weakness of the law of the father, of this symbolic part of the father's function, have conditioned a strong polarization of the adopt attitude. So, in these societies, we have a substantial group which turns to the image of the symbolic father. As the national history is a privileged source of such figures, this term will strengthen different forms of nationalistic and patriotic discourse. But this discourse is quite helpless in its duty of identifying the real problems of society, and in the same time dangerously efficient at mobilizing the resentimental social energy. So we have one big group which will turn to the imaginative vision of the father and will find it in the historical imaginary. But we have another social group, younger generation of better educated people, more connected to European, West European trends, which adopt the emancipatory discourse, fighting the image of the traditional dominating patriarch. Although being the minority, I think we here are more or less this group, but nevertheless in the society we are strongly a minority. But this group is quite influential within the social communication. But according to my hypothesis, we are also more dependent of this kind of imaginary patriarch than facing the real problems of the society. So the problem is that either the group which is very nationalistic, let's say, and love the patriarch, and the group which is revolt against this patriarch, are dependent of the same quite fantastic image of the father. The problem of real political agency is defined in this way, and this has some historical explanation. I would say that there are two main reasons for this situation. First of all, the majority of the people of these countries, Poland and countries of Eastern Europe, didn't participate in the political agency till 19th or even 20th century. As we know, in matter of fact, till the end of the 19th century, or even till the period between two wars, 70% of the society were peasants, and they were not, or in a little amount, politically active. Then, and maybe more important, the politicization, the fact of becoming the political agent, was due to a cruel revolution, but a revolution which rather happened to East European nations than was performed by them. We know that the most important moments of this revolution were the annihilation of Jewish small bourgeoisie by Nazi Germany and the destruction of the class of landlords by communist Russia in Poland. But, again, this was not the agency of the people in Poland, the most important part of the society, that made this. It was something which happened to the society. Now I will come back to the situation of the subjectivity in Western Europe in quite a general way. I will refer to a short sentence of Etienne Balibar, part of his conference in Warsaw University in 2011. He said then about the revolt of the 68, and here I quote, "We thought that we will simply fight capitalism, but in matter of fact, we destroyed traditional bourgeoisie in the name of hyper-capitalism." This point is very interesting. Balibar doesn't say that bourgeoisie doesn't own power and money anymore. He says that the traditional figure of patriarchat, for example in France incarnated by General de Gaulle, after the revolt wasn't dominating anymore in the social consciousness. Nevertheless, it didn't soften the symbolic system, the law of the value, and the idea of the objectivity of the market economy. These laws became rather stronger then, and at the same time anonymous. Trying to give some light onto this question, I will follow some thoughts of Freud from the famous essay Civilization and its Discontents. This text perfectly describes the suffering in the culture which is based on the law of the father. But the question is how we suffer when there is no image of the father, when there is only the law. In the discussed essay, Freud stresses the fact that, and here I quote, "the severity of superego developed in child doesn't correspond to the severity of its parents. It seems that the first is not dependent on the other, even in the case of a very gentle upbringing, the child can develop a very rigorous conscience." Freud says that if we have very nice parents, yes, like after 68, smoking grass and making parties all the time, the child will have big chance to be extremely severe and have a very repressive consciousness. And if we think about this point, we can see that the disappearance of a strong paternal image, of a strong paternal figure, will bring stiffening of the law, and this law becomes more severe than it was before. Alenka Żupancic, in her last book, has a nice explanation of it. It is a book about comedy, but it is also a book about, say, philosophy. And her explanation is that the imaginary father is always funny. This image can be very dangerous, can be terrible, but in the same time, it is like a person of comedy. And this is why it is never so repressive as the anonymous law. So, where we can find the signs of this process in the consciousness of Western culture? I would suggest that the gradual weakening of the image of the father due to its deconstruction is coupled with the feeling of growing domination of some extremely oppressive, demanding instance. Isn't it this phenomenon the source of the complaint on the stiffening patriarchal oppression which constantly reappears, for example, in feminist discourse? I think that also the stiffening force of liberal ideology, mainly in this part where, in matter of fact, there is no alternative, no intellectual alternative to liberal economy, is also a part of this process. And I would say that in some way, the East European countries are now on the road from the situation in which their imagination is ruled by the oppressive and maybe dangerous. We don't know what will happen when Kaczynski will win the elections, next election. But in some way grotesque image of a patriarch, and towards this world of anonymous law to which everybody is subdued, but we don't know who is the incarnation of it. Here I will end. Thank you.